Hi, it's Matt from the Large Blast podcast, and I just bought myself a new army.
That is one big pile of shit.
So it's a real mixed box of, Lizardmen. Some unpainted parts, some painted parts, some poorly painted parts, and some reasonably well painted parts. But I really kind of want to bring it all together and merge it into one coherent force. So let's strip them. No! No way! I've had these models for 7 months waiting to be painted. I'm not going to bother stripping them. I'm just going to paint right over the top. The beauty of contrast paints is very high pigment, thin paint. Just paint over the top of whatever is underneath and you'll just tint it. You'll just colour tint it. So I found this out painting my Blood Angels from my Space Hulk box sets. I'd sprayed them all red, bright red, and then I put them back in the box and they waited to be painted for 2 years. And I looked at these sprues and I honestly thought I'd ruined them. They were horrible bright red. Luckily for me, contrast paint had come out in the 2 years that had passed, and I just used the medium 50-50 ratio, and I was able to just put the contrast paint that was a slightly darker red into half of the armor panels on the Space Marines, and it looked great. So I bought the Lizardmen to pose with my Bretonnians on Instagram. They're the red shirts. They're the guys that are going to go out and they're going to die every single time. So the quality doesn't matter, and the intention was that I would just buy them and take photos of them, but obviously because I'm taking photos of them next to my own models, suddenly that didn't seem like a great idea. I didn't want to put them next to each other, so I thought I'd better do something to them, at least just to get the bases to match up. But as with anything creative, you just end up going down a rabbit hole, so it wasn't even enough just to paint all the bases. So that's where I ended up with the contrast paints. I knew that I could just apply a few different colours of the contrast paints over the top, and then the models would look a lot better. And actually I found that some of them weren't even glued together, so I'm just starting to glue them together, work out what I'm going to bother with, what I'm not going to bother with, and then probably just do a couple of test models. So just batch paint the whole lot, which will be easy as well because contrast paints you can just blast through the airbrush, so I'll try and do that for as much as I can. So I've cut out all the dead wood, worked out what I'm going to be doing, and I'm left with a nice little army. And to top it off, I even got the book. So usual tactic, always do a test model. So here is my first test model done. So original on the left, and then we're going to end up with the model on the right, which just looks a lot better. If you want it, the recipe's down below, but to be honest, it really doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what colour you paint these paints on. Do a test model and use them. They're so good for doing work like this, and you could just start the model from scratch like this, paint it blue, pick a different contrast paint and put it over the top. In this case we've got Terradon turquoise. That's the main colour. The famous combination is Snakebite leather over lead vulture. Welsh and I, our latest armies are using this technique. Check them out on our Instagram, but just play around with them and try it. So I actually found that loads of parts were unpainted, so I had to go through and just airbrush some primer on, trying not to get the base coat on any of the painted surfaces. The other thing I did too, I put a bit of base coat on the base just to start the bases off, as they were just black plastic. and because I was using a white primer, I did put a little bit on the flesh of the lizardmen because they're so textured. It just created a bit of a highlight on the top parts of the skin, which the contrast paint will pick out really well. So in this case, we've got to rim the base, so just airbrush it on. You hardly get any paint anywhere else, and it's fine. Done. Simple. It was at this point that I realised I'd bitten off way more than I could chew.
Crap balls. What do you know?
Again, I'm just airbrushing over the top. Doesn't matter what I hit. So this is the main flesh colour. This is the Terradon turquoise contrast paint. No medium, nothing, just straight in the airbrush. And I'm not putting too much on, just enough to coat everywhere fairly evenly, not too thin, not too thick. The other thing I do is I just get a stiff old brush and I just brush it off on the highlighted areas, and you just take a bit of the paint off and it just kind of creates a natural highlight.
Oh gosh, they're everywhere.
I'm getting pretty excited at this point. It looks like one cohesive force. The brown contrast paints are all excellent. For the gold, rather than using an ink, I am using a contrast paint, but I have mixed it about 50-50 with the medium, and I'm using it like an ink. I also applied a 50-50 skeleton horde mix on the teeth and the toenails. Look at those two. So at the Wraithbone step, I also did a little dot in the eye, put a yellow contrast paint in, and then did a little black pupil in a line like a dinosaur eye. Bang, done. Just put a bit of Armageddon dust on the base, and we are finished. Look at that. If you're new to the podcast, you can listen to us here, YouTube, you can listen to us on Spotify, follow us on Instagram, like and subscribe.